There is a number that changed everything for you. You just don't know it yet. Not $1 million, not 100,000, $10,000. Now, before you assume you know where this is going, I need to stop you. Because this is not a video about how $10,000 will make you financially free. It is not a video about how this number is all you need. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why $10,000 is not enough. Why it was never going to be enough. And why that is actually the most important thing you can learn about it. Here is what we are going to cover. We are going to start with the frozen state, the neurological condition that keeps most people trapped. Then, the first thaw. What actually changes when you cross that line? After that, the dopamine drain, the biological mechanism that destroys savings before they can become a foundation. Then, the great filter, the most dangerous moment in this entire journey. Then, the builder's blueprint, exactly what to do with this money. And finally, the question worth asking. This is not a motivational video. There is no hype here. If your savings are below $10,000, what I'm about to tell you is the most important financial information you will ever receive. Let's begin. In physics, matter exists in states: solid, liquid, gas. The same substance, water, behaves in completely different ways depending on which state it's in. Ice is rigid, locked in place. It cannot flow, cannot adapt, cannot find new paths. It simply holds whatever shape the cold has forced it into. Liquid water moves. It responds. It finds openings that weren't visible before. The temperature doesn't change what the substance is. It changes the rules it operates under. Your financial life works the same way. Below a certain threshold, your money, and more importantly, your brain, is frozen. You are not building. You are not navigating. You are holding the shape that your circumstances have forced on you. And here is where almost all financial advice fails you completely. It speaks to you as if you are already liquid, as if the rules of investing, compounding, long-term thinking already apply to your situation. They don't. Not yet. Not while you're frozen. Because what the research tells us, and this is not opinion, this is neuroscience, is that the frozen state is not just a financial condition, it is a neurological one. In 2013, economist Sendil Mullainathan at Harvard and psychologist Eldar Shafir at Princeton published a landmark study on what they called scarcity. Their finding was precise and brutal. When a person is consumed by financial stress, constantly calculating how to cover rent, how to fix the car, how to make it to the end of the month, their effective cognitive capacity drops by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. 13 points. 13 points. That is the same cognitive impairment as going 24 hours without sleep. That is worse than being legally drunk in most countries. Think about what that means. The person working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything, trying desperately to get ahead. That person is making every single financial decision while operating with a significantly damaged processor. Not because they are less intelligent, not because they don't care, because the weight of financial insecurity is consuming the cognitive bandwidth that would otherwise be available for strategic thinking, long-term planning, sound judgment. This is what I call the frozen state. In the frozen state, your brain is not your ally. It is running a program designed for immediate survival, the same program humans used thousands of years ago when threats were physical. And the only planning horizon that mattered was the next few minutes. And so you make decisions that look irrational from the outside, but are perfectly rational from inside a brain that believes it is fighting for its life right now. You take the payday loan because the need is now. You choose the cheap option because the better option requires capital you don't have. You avoid thinking about retirement because your brain literally cannot allocate bandwidth to a problem that far away when there are fires burning today. You are not stupid. You are frozen. And the system knows this. The system is built around this. Late fees, overdraft charges, high interest rates on small balances, minimum balance penalties. These are not accidents of the financial system. They are taxes levied specifically on people in the frozen state. The less you have, the more it costs you to have less. This is the frozen state, and the first thing you need to understand about $10,000 is what it begins to do to it. I said begins, not completes, begins. And that distinction between beginning and completing is exactly what this entire video is about. Now, before we talk about the thaw, I need to talk about the most emotional chapter of this journey. Because the frozen state has a defense mechanism, and most people never see it coming until it has already taken everything. But first, the thaw. Let me show you two people. Same city, same job, same salary. Call them Marcus and Daniel. Marcus has $300 in his checking account and a month of rent on a credit card. Daniel has $11,000 in a savings account he does not touch. Neither of them is rich. Neither drives a luxury car or lives in an expensive apartment. On the surface, they look almost identical. Their manager walks in, mandatory unpaid overtime, starting next week. Watch what happens inside each of them. Marcus's nervous system responds before he has time to think. Cortisol spikes. His brain runs the calculation instantly. Push back and risk losing the job. Lose the job and miss rent. Miss rent and the spiral begins before he can stop it. Fear hijacks his rationality completely. He says yes. He goes home exhausted and angry, feeling powerless because he is powerless. Daniel runs the same calculation, but the answer is different. $11,000 is 3 to 4 months of basic expenses. His brain knows this even without consciously doing the math. The threat is real, but it is not immediately catastrophic. He has a small window. He doesn't quit. He doesn't make a scene. But he looks his manager in the eye and says calmly, "I have some concerns about this. Can we find time to talk?" Same situation, same salary, same skills, two completely different responses. This is the first thaw. When a financial buffer exists, something shifts in the nervous system. The survival alarm, the constant low-frequency hum of financial anxiety you have probably stopped noticing because it has always been there, begins to quiet. Not completely, but enough. Enough for the brain to begin accessing strategic mode. Enough to start thinking in months instead of days. Enough to make decisions from a position of partial stability. Instead of pure fear, you will feel this as sleeping slightly better, being less reactive, making fewer impulsive decisions, starting to see options that were invisible before. This is real, this is neurological, and it begins at $10,000. But here is what I need you to understand clearly. The first thaw is not freedom. The first thaw is not even close to freedom. Daniel has a window. Daniel has breathing room. Daniel has the beginning of something. But Daniel's power to refuse, his real ability to walk away from a bad situation without catastrophic consequences, is still limited. 3 to 4 months is not independence. It is the difference between being completely frozen and beginning to move. The compounding math at this level is also still largely theoretical. 10% of $10,000 is $1,000 per year. Real money, but not money that structurally changes your life. Not yet. What $10,000 does is this, and only this. It proves that the frozen state is not permanent. That proof matters enormously, because you cannot build toward a state your brain has never experienced. The first thaw is the beginning of a new reference point, not the destination. And now we arrive at the chapter I told you about at the beginning, the most emotional one, the one that happens before most people ever reach $10,000, and that destroys the savings of almost everyone who does. I call this the dopamine drain. Here is a question that deserves a real answer, not a moral lecture. Why do people with very little money sometimes spend it on things that seem unnecessary? Why does someone struggling financially buy expensive sneakers? Why do they upgrade their phone when the old one still works? Why do they eat out when there are groceries at home? The easy answer, the one you'll hear most often, is poor discipline, bad priorities, a failure of character. That answer is wrong, and it is useless. The real answer is biology. When you live in the frozen state, your cortisol levels are chronically elevated, not occasionally, chronically. Your body is running a permanent low-grade alarm every hour of every day. And chronically elevated cortisol is not just uncomfortable, it is physically damaging. It disrupts sleep, it impairs immune function. It is, in the most literal sense, a slow poison your own body is producing. And your brain, which is designed above everything else to keep you alive, is desperate for relief. Here is what happens when you walk into a store and buy something, anything. Your brain releases dopamine, not because the object has value, not because you made a rational decision, because the act of acquiring something triggers the same reward circuitry that evolved to reinforce survival behaviors. For a few minutes, the cortisol drops, the alarm quiets. You feel, briefly, like you won. This is not weakness. This is self-medication. You are using the one tool available to you, consumption, to manage a neurological state that your environment has imposed on you. You are not spending money. You are buying relief from a pain that never fully stops. The problem is that the relief lasts 20 minutes. The balance lasts 20 years. And the dopamine drain has a social dimension that makes it even harder to escape. Picture this. You have been grinding for months, saying no to everything, and then your friends invite you out. A dinner, a night out, nothing extravagant, and you go. Because the alternative is explaining. Again, why you can't. Because the alternative is the look on their faces. Because the alternative is feeling like the person who is always the problem. And so you spend the money. And the dopamine fires. And for a few hours, you are not the person who is always sacrificing, always calculating, always behind. This is not vanity. This is a rational response to a system that has made your financial struggles socially visible in a way that is genuinely painful. Understanding this does not mean accepting it. It means seeing it clearly enough to make a different choice, not through willpower alone, but through strategy. Because willpower depletes, and you are already spending enormous amounts of it just navigating the frozen state. The real solution to the dopamine drain is not suppression, it is substitution. Your brain does not care where the dopamine comes from. It cares that the reward fires. And over time, with deliberate practice, it is possible to retrain that circuitry, to associate the reward not with spending, but with the number growing, with hitting a milestone, with watching the frozen state crack. Track the number visibly, celebrate small thresholds, build a system where the brain can see it is winning. This is not about becoming someone who finds joy in austerity. This is about directing your own reward system with intention before the consumer economy directs it for you. Now, if you have made it through the dopamine drain, if you have found your way to $10,000 despite everything, you are about to face the most dangerous moment of this entire journey. And I mean the most dangerous. In cosmology, the great filter is a hypothetical barrier, so difficult to cross that the vast majority of civilizations that begin developing toward complexity collapse before reaching the other side. In the process of building financial stability, $10,000 is that filter. And what makes it a filter is not the difficulty of accumulating the money, it is the difficulty of keeping it. Once you have it, here is the paradox no one prepares you for. The moment you first have $10,000 saved, the moment the number finally appears on your screen, you will feel more tempted to spend it than you have felt at any point before. Think about what that moment represents. You have been in the frozen state. You have been saying no for months, eating the same cheap meals, wearing the same clothes from 2 years ago, watching your friends go on trips you didn't take, buy things you didn't buy, live in a way you were deliberately choosing not to live. And now, for the first time, there is something there. Real money, a number that feels significant. And your brain, which spent all that time in survival mode, which has been deprived of every reward signal for months, immediately generates what psychologists call a compensation narrative. You worked so hard, you sacrificed so much. You deserve to reward yourself. You earned this. Now picture this exact moment. You check your account, $10,200. You feel it, finally. And then, on the way home, your 5-year-old Honda makes a sound it has never made before. You take it to the mechanic. The repair is going to cost $800. While you are sitting in the waiting room, you pick up your phone, and there, in your feed, is an ad for a car. Clean, new, the monthly payments are listed right there. $420 a month. The down payment to drive it off the lot today, $9,500. Almost exactly what you have. You feel the pull. You can feel it physically. And the compensation narrative is already running. You work hard. You deserve reliable transportation. This is a reasonable decision. You are not being irresponsible. This is just being practical. This is the moment the filter activates. This is where most people fall. They sign the paperwork. They drive the new car home. And in that moment, they feel like they have arrived, like they have succeeded, like the sacrifice finally paid off. But what actually happened is this. The $9,500 is gone. The compound interest clock, which had just started ticking, has been reset to 0. And now there is a new monthly payment, higher insurance, and the frozen state, which had just begun to crack, closes back around them, not just back to 0, below 0, because now there is debt where there was once a seed. And this time, it is harder to go back because you have tasted what it felt like to have the money, and you have tasted what it felt like to spend it. And the deprivation of saving again will feel sharper, not duller. Some people never try again. The compensation narrative says, this money is a reward for the past. The builder's mindset says, this money is the foundation of the future. Those two framings are in direct conflict. And at the moment you cross the $10,000 line, one of them will win. But the internal temptation is only half of the filter. The other half is external. When you start protecting your savings, when you stop spending in the ways your social group expects, people notice, and the response is rarely supportive. Why are you being so cheap? You have money now. You think you're better than us? This is not malice. This is threat response. Your discipline is an implicit commentary on their choices. Your progress makes their stagnation visible. To pass through the great filter, you need to hold one idea clearly. This money is not a reward. It is a seed. If you eat the seed, there is no harvest. Not this year, not in 10 years, not ever. The great filter is not a test of how hard you worked. It is not a test of what you deserve. It is a test of one thing only, whether you believe your future self is worth protecting. And now, if you have held the line, if the seed is still there, we need to talk about what to actually do with it. You have crossed the line, $10,000. The filter is behind you. The seed is intact. Now what? Let me be direct with you about something first, because most financial content will not be. At $10,000, you are not yet in a position to let your money work for you in any life-changing way. The compounding math does not yet move the needle on your cost of living. The buffer exists, but it does not yet give you the negotiating power that real financial stability provides. What you have right now is a platform, a proof of concept, a starting point, and your single most important goal from this moment is to protect what you have, while accelerating toward the threshold where the rules actually change permanently. That threshold is not $10,000. We will decode that in the next conversation. For now, this money has two jobs, and they must be kept completely separate. The first job is armor. Take half of this money, $4,000 to $5,000, and put it in a completely separate high-yield savings account. Label it mentally and practically as untouchable. This is not an investment. This is not an opportunity fund. This is your bulletproof vest. Its only function is to absorb the bullets that life will fire at you. The unexpected car repair, the medical bill, the month you lose income. When those things happen, and they will happen, this money steps in. And because it steps in, you do not go back into debt. You do not return to the frozen state. The thaw holds. Do not touch the bulletproof vest for anything other than a genuine emergency. Every time you protect it, you are protecting your own brain chemistry. The second job is soldiers. The remaining $5,000, these are your soldiers. Send them into the market. A low-cost index fund tracking the broad market. No individual stocks. No complex strategies, no chasing trends. I know this sounds boring. It is boring. It is also the most evidence-supported approach available to someone without insider information or the time to manage an active portfolio. Put the soldiers in the field. Let them work. Do not pull them back at the first sign of volatility. But here is what most financial blueprints skip entirely. At this scale, the soldiers are a beginning, not an engine. $5,000 growing at 10% per year generates $500. Real money, but not the kind that structurally changes your cost of living, not yet. The actual turbocharger at this stage is asymmetric investment, and the highest returning asymmetric investment available to most people is not in any market. It is in themselves. A certification, a skill that commands a market premium, a capability that makes you harder to replace and easier to pay well. A $1,500 investment in a skill that increases your annual income by $3,000, delivers a 200% return in year one, and continues paying indefinitely. No legal financial instrument offers this. Human capital investment at this stage almost always outperforms everything else available to you. Now, the death list. 3 specific behaviors that will instantly return you to zero, and they become more tempting, not less, as the number grows. 1. Do not use leverage. Do not borrow to invest. Institutions will offer you margin. Do not listen to them. Leverage compresses time in the wrong direction. A single bad month with leverage can wipe everything. 2. Do not chase complexity. Options, crypto trading, high-frequency strategies, anything that promises extraordinary returns in short time frames. These are mechanisms for transferring money from people who don't have enough of it to people who do. At $10,000, you are the prey in those systems, not the predator. 3. Do not lock your liquidity. Any major illiquid commitment will close the frozen state back around you. The armor you have built depends on the money remaining accessible. Your goal from $10,000 is not to watch this number slowly compound into wealth over decades. Your goal is to reach the next threshold, The one where the compounding math actually begins to cover real monthly expenses, where the power to refuse becomes genuine, where the rules change permanently. That threshold is $20,000. Keep the armor intact, send the soldiers out, invest in your own value, and move. When you cross the $10,000 line, you will probably feel disappointed, not because the money isn't there, but because you will look in the mirror and see exactly the same person, same apartment, same clothes, same problems more or less. And that gap between what you expected to feel and what you actually feel is where most people make a critical mistake. They conclude that the money didn't matter, that the sacrifice wasn't worth it. What they are missing is that the most significant change is invisible. Your cortisol baseline is lower. Your brain has more bandwidth for decisions that aren't about immediate survival. Your nervous system is running with less background noise. You sleep differently. You respond to threats differently. You make different decisions, not dramatically, not overnight, but consistently. Over time, none of this shows up in the mirror. All of it shows up in the next 5 years. Behavioral economists call this the arrival fallacy, the belief that reaching a goal will produce a sustained state of satisfaction. Research consistently shows it doesn't. The emotional boost fades quickly. We return to our baseline. But the $10,000 line is not about emotional satisfaction. It is about structural change. The point is not to feel wealthy. The point is to operate differently, to have different options, to make different decisions from a different neurological baseline. The frozen state tells you 10,000 is enough, that you have done the hard part, that now you can breathe and reward yourself. The builder's mindset says something different. You just finished the proof of concept. The real work starts now. So here is the uncomfortable question I want to leave you with. Not, do you have $10,000? But, now that you understand what 10,000 actually is and what it isn't, now that you know what 20,000 unlocks that 10,000 doesn't, what are you going to do with that information? The thaw has begun. The seed is intact. The soldiers are in the field. The only question left is whether you let the momentum complete or whether you stop here. Reward yourself and hand the frozen state the opening it has been waiting for. The door is open. It has always been open. You have the map. You just took the first step. Let's look at where we've been. We started with the frozen state, the neurological reality of a brain operating without a financial buffer. Below $10,000, the rules of building do not yet apply. Not because you are not trying, because your processor is running impaired. We examined the first thaw, what actually begins to change when the buffer exists. Not freedom, not independence. The beginning of strategic thinking, the first evidence that a different mode of operation is possible. We decoded the dopamine drain, the biological mechanism that destroys savings before they can become a foundation. Not a character flaw, a survival response to chronic stress. One that can be redirected once you see it clearly. We confronted the great filter, the Honda, the new car ad, the $9,500, the compensation narrative, the moment everything you built can disappear in a single afternoon. The test is not of your earning ability, it is of your identity. We mapped the builder's blueprint, the bulletproof vest, the soldiers, the asymmetric human capital investment, and the 3 behaviors on the death list that will return you to zero. And we ended with the question that matters more than any of the numbers. Now that you know what is ahead, what are you going to do with that? If something in this video shifted how you see your financial situation, write it in the comments. Not a vague intention, something specific. Where you are right now, what you are committing to change this week. That comment is not for me. It is a contract with the version of you that will read it again 2 years from now. The thaw has started. Don't freeze again.